26. F. Never thought a simple photograph could destroy my marriage and expose the ugly truth about the people I'd been trying so hard to impress for 2 long years. But there I was, sitting at my in-laws' massive dining table with its imported Italian marble surface, watching my husband's entire family laugh at a picture of my childhood home like it was the funniest thing they'd ever seen in their privileged lives. My mother-in-law, Susan, clutched her pearl necklace as she giggled, pointing at the image on her daughter's phone screen with one perfectly manicured finger. "How could anyone actually live in a place like that?" she said between bursts of cruel laughter, tears of mirth streaming down her carefully made-up face. "It looks like something from those charity commercials where they ask for just pennies a day." The worst part wasn't their laughter echoing off the chandelier that probably cost more than my parents made in 5 years. The worst part was the deafening silence from Noah, my husband of 2 years, who just sat there staring at his plate while his family tore apart everything that made me who I am today. What would you do if the people who were supposed to become your family, the people whose approval you'd spent years trying to earn, revealed that they'd been looking down on you from the very beginning? Would you sit there and take it? Would you defend yourself? Or would you wait for the perfect moment to show them exactly how wrong they were about everything? That night started like every other mandatory monthly dinner at Susan and Richard's colonial estate. The one they never let anyone forget cost them $3.5 million. Their house sat in the most exclusive neighborhood in the state, the kind where the homeowners association fined you if your grass was half an inch too tall or your mailbox wasn't the approved shade of black. Every room was decorated like a museum exhibit, with furniture you weren't supposed to actually sit on, and art that required special lighting to display properly. I've been coming to these dinners for 3 years, since Noah and I started dating, and I'd never once felt comfortable in that house. Susan greeted us at the door wearing a dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary, her smile as fake as the Botox that kept her forehead from moving when she pretended to be happy to see me. "Oh, darling, you're here," she said to Noah, pulling him into a perfumed embrace that lasted just long enough to remind me that I was the claimed had been in Richard's family for 6 generations, though I'd once overheard the housekeeper saying they'd bought it at an estate sale 5 years ago. Noah's sister Jessica was already there with her husband Marcus, both of them looking like they'd coordinated their outfits to match the dining room's color scheme. Jessica worked as what she called a social media influencer, which meant she posted pictures of herself in expensive clothes and pretended her life was perfect for strangers on the internet. Marcus was a day trader who'd lost more money than he'd made, but still acted like he was the next Warren Buffett. Richard sat at the head of the table like a king surveying his kingdom, his phone in one hand and a glass of whiskey that cost more per ounce than most people spent on groceries in the other. "So," Susan said as the housekeeper served the first course, a soup with a French name I couldn't pronounce and ingredients I couldn't identify. "I was going through some old photos today for the family album I'm putting together for the country club's ancestry display." She had this way of starting conversations that always made my stomach clench, like watching someone lay a trap and knowing you were about to walk right into it. "You know how important heritage is, don't you, dear?" She looked directly at me when she said it, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Of course," I said, though I knew whatever came next would be designed to hurt me. "Jessica, darling, show them what you found during your little investigation," Susan said, and the word investigation made my blood run cold. Jessica pulled out her phone with the kind of glee usually reserved for children on Christmas morning. "I was doing some research," she said, emphasizing the word research like she'd been conducting some kind of scientific study. "You know, for the family album Mom's making, we want to include everyone's background, to show where we all come from." She turned the screen toward the table, and there it was in high definition, a photo from my cousin Marie's Facebook page showing my childhood home in all its humble glory. The house where I'd grown up sat on a quarter-acre of land on the wrong side of town, a 2-bedroom ranch with aluminum siding that had seen better days, and a roof that my dad had patched himself more times than I could count. The paint was peeling in places, revealing the older color underneath like geological layers of our financial struggles. The chain-link fence my dad had installed himself surrounded the small yard. Amusement. "Oh my goodness," she gasped between giggles. "Is that really where you grew up? It's so... what's the word I'm looking for?" "Tragic," Jessica supplied helpfully. zooming in on the picture to show more details. Look at this. Is that duct tape holding the mailbox to the post? That's resourcefulness, I said, my voice steady even though my hands were shaking under the table. Is that what we're calling it now? Richard said, finally looking up from his phone to join in the fun. In my day, we called it being too poor to properly maintain your property. Look at the car, Marcus said, pointing at the screen. Is that even a car? It looks like something from a junkyard. That's a 1995 Honda Civic, I said. My dad bought it used and maintained it himself for 15 years. It never once broke down on us. Because you couldn't afford for it to break down, Susan said with fake sympathy that made me want to scream. Oh, honey, that must have been so difficult for you growing up in such poverty. We weren't in poverty, I said. My parents both worked full-time jobs. We had everything we needed. But not everything you wanted, Jessica said. That must be why you were so eager to marry Noah. To escape all that. I married Noah because I love him, I said, looking at my husband, waiting for him to say something, anything, to defend me or our relationship. Noah shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his eyes focused on the soup he wasn't eating. Can we maybe talk about something else? He said quietly, his voice barely audible over his family's continued laughter. Oh, come on, Noah, Susan said, waving her hand dismissively. We're just having a little fun. Surely your wife can take a joke. After all, she must have developed quite a thick skin growing up in those conditions. Those conditions, I repeated, feeling something inside me starting to crack. You mean a home where my parents loved each other? Where my grandmother lived with us and taught me to read on that front porch you're all laughing at? Where my mother grew vegetables in the backyard to make sure we always had fresh food? Where my father worked 16-hour days to make sure I could go to college without debt? Yes, dear, we understand you're trying to put a positive spin on it, Susan said condescendingly, found it more amusing than sad. Living paycheck to paycheck like that. Never knowing if you'd have enough for basic repairs. We always had enough, I said firmly. Maybe not excess, but enough. Enough, Jessica laughed. Look at this. There's actually a clothesline in the backyard. Did you not have a dryer? We had a dryer, I said. My mother preferred to line dry clothes when the weather was nice. She said it made them smell like sunshine. This sent them into fresh hysterics. Smell like sunshine, Marcus repeated, wiping tears from his eyes. That's what poor people say when they can't afford the electric bill. I notice there's no garage, Richard observed. Where did you keep your other cars? We had one car, I said. We didn't need more. One car for 4 people? Susan looked genuinely shocked. How did you manage? What if there was an emergency? We managed just fine, I said. My parents coordinated their schedules. We helped each other. We made it work. Made it work, Susan repeated slowly, like she was tasting the words. Yes, I suppose that's what people in your situation have to do. Make it work. Settle for less. Accept limitations. Is that what you think I did with Noah? I asked directly. Settled? The table went quiet for a moment, the question hanging in the air like a challenge. Susan's smile turned even colder, if that was possible. Of course not, dear. Noah is the one who settled. We've just been too polite to say it out loud before now. Mom, Noah said, but it was weak, without conviction. What? We're all thinking it, Susan continued. You could have married Catherine Blackwood. Her father owns half the commercial real estate in the city. Or Jennifer Martin. Her family has been in the social register for 8 generations. Instead, you chose... She gestured vaguely in my direction. This. This, I said slowly, is a human being. Your daughter-in-law. The woman your son chose to spend his life with. Yes, and we've tried to accept that choice, Richard said. We've welcomed you into our homes, introduced you to our friends, tried to teach you how to fit into our world. Teach me, I said, anger finally breaking. I said, like judging people by their bank accounts instead of their character? Like determining someone's worth by the size of their house instead of the size of their heart? Hearts don't pay bills, Richard said bluntly. They don't open doors or create opportunities. Money does that. My parents' hearts got me through college, I said. Their love and support gave me the confidence to pursue my dreams. Their values taught me the importance of hard work and integrity. And where did those values get them? Susan asked. Still in that same little house, I assume. They're happy, I said simply. Genuinely, truly happy. Can you say the same? Susan's face flushed. How dare you question my happiness? I have everything anyone could want. Everything money can buy, I corrected. But you don't have a marriage where you actually seem to enjoy each other's company. You don't have children who visit because they want to, not because it's obligatory. You don't have friends who would stick around if the money disappeared tomorrow. You know nothing about our lives, Richard said angrily. I know what I've observed for 3 years, I said. I know that you spend more time on your phone during family dinners than talking to each other. I know that Susan has had 3 different tennis partners this year because she keeps alienating them with her need to compete over everything. I know that Jessica only calls when she needs money, and you only give it to maintain the image of the perfect family. At least we have an image to maintain, Susan shot back. What does your family have? That embarrassing little shack and a rusty car? They have each other, I said. They have genuine relationships. They have a home full of laughter that isn't at someone else's expense. How touching, Susan said sarcastically. I'm sure that keeps them warm when they can't afford to pay the heating bill. That's when we heard the doorbell ring. Susan looked annoyed at the interruption, checking her watch with obvious irritation. Who on earth could that be? We're not expecting anyone else tonight. Richard stood up with the put-upon sigh of someone whose entire life was just one inconvenience after another. I'll deal with it. Probably someone selling something. The neighborhood has really gone downhill if they're allowing solicitors past the gate. We heard voices in the foyer, Richard's irritated tone mixing with another voice that made my heart leap, of someone who had never doubted her place in the world. Her silver hair was pulled back in the same elegant bun she'd worn for my entire life, and her simple black dress probably cost less than Susan's shoes, but she wore it like it was haute couture. Her eyes, the same green as mine, swept the room and took in everything in a single glance. The ostentatious wealth trying to mask itself as taste. The phone still displaying the photo of our old house. The guilty looks on some faces and the defiant sneers on others. The way Noah wouldn't meet her eyes. The way I was gripping my napkin like it was a lifeline. "Grandma!" I said, jumping up to embrace her, feeling like a drowning person who'd just been thrown a rope. "What are you doing here?" "I had some business in the neighborhood," she said, her voice carrying that hint of amusement that I knew meant she was up to something. "I thought I'd stop by and see my granddaughter. It's been too long since we've had a chance to catch up." "Business?" Susan said, her tone making it clear she couldn't imagine what kind of business someone like my grandmother could possibly have in their exclusive neighborhood. "In Willowbrook Estates?" "Yes," Grandma said simply, taking the seat that Richard reluctantly offered her. "I had some matters to attend to regarding one of my properties." Jessica actually snorted. "Your property? Here?" She looked at me with undisguised glee. "Did your grandmother clean someone's house?" "Jessica," Noah said, showing more backbone than he had all evening, though it still wasn't much. "That's rude." "I'm just asking," Jessica said with fake innocence. "I mean, what else could she mean?" Grandma smiled, and I recognized that smile. It was the same one she'd worn when she'd taught me to play chess, right before she'd executed a move that would destroy my entire strategy. "Oh, I don't clean houses, dear. I own them." "You own a house in Willowbrook Estates?" Richard said skeptically. "I know every homeowner in this neighborhood." "Do you?" Grandma asked mildly. "How interesting. Then you must know Wellington Properties quite well." The name dropped into the conversation like a stone into still water, sending ripples in every direction. Richard's face went through several interesting color changes, starting with confusion and ending with something that looked like the big circumstances? Jessica asked, looking between her parents with growing alarm. "Should I tell them? Or would you prefer to?" Grandma asked Richard, who had gone pale. "This is ridiculous," Susan said, but her hands were shaking as she reached for her wineglass. "Richard, tell her she's wrong." Richard couldn't seem to find his voice. He was staring at my grandmother like she was a ghost from his past, which, in a way, she was. "Perhaps I should refresh your memory," Grandma said. 15 years ago, you came to Wellington Properties after being rejected by 7 different mortgage lenders. Something about a bankruptcy from a failed business venture? And some questionable tax filings that made traditional lenders nervous? How could you possibly know that? Richard whispered. Because I own Wellington Properties, Grandma said simply. I founded it in 1983 with a single rental property and built it into what it is today. But you lived in that house, Jessica said, pointing at the phone that still displayed the picture they'd been mocking. That tiny, horrible house. That tiny, wonderful house, Grandma corrected, where I raised my son and helped raise my granddaughter, where I taught her the value of hard work, humility, and kindness, where I could have chosen to move us anywhere, into any of my properties, but chose to stay because I wanted my family to understand that happiness doesn't come from square footage. This is insane, Susan said, grabbing the phone to look at something, anything, that would prove my grandmother wrong. Wellington Properties is owned by R. Wellington. Rose Wellington, Grandma said. Wellington was my maiden name. I used it when I started the company because I wanted something that was entirely mine, built from my own efforts. You're lying, Susan said desperately. This is some kind of trick. Grandma pulled out a folder from her bag, one I hadn't even noticed she was carrying. She laid out document after document on Susan's precious dining table. Property deeds, bank statements, corporation papers, all bearing her name, all completely legitimate, all proving exactly what she was saying. You own our house, Richard said, his voice hollow. I own your house, Grandma confirmed. I own the country club you're so proud of belonging to. I own the building where your office is located, Richard. I asked, speaking for the first time since Grandma had arrived. Why would you do that? Because I believe in giving people chances, Grandma said. I believe that everyone deserves the opportunity to build a good life for their family. I just didn't realize that some people would use that opportunity to look down on others who had less. We didn't know, Susan said. You didn't know I owned your house, Grandma said. But you knew I was a human being. You knew my son was a good man who worked hard to provide for his family. You knew my granddaughter was brilliant and kind and accomplished. None of that was enough to earn your respect? If we had known, Richard started. If you had known I had money, you would have treated me differently, Grandma finished. That's exactly the problem. Your respect is for sale to the highest bidder. That's not true, Susan protested. Isn't it? Grandma asked. You just spent the last hour mocking a photograph of the house where I chose to raise my family, laughing at our supposed poverty, suggesting that my granddaughter only married your son for money. Tell me, what exactly would be different if you'd known the truth? Everything, Jessica said quietly. Yes, Grandma agreed. Everything would be different. You would have been falling all over yourselves to impress me, to gain my favor, to be in my good graces. Not because of who I am as a person, but because of what I own. What do you want? Susan asked, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked afraid. Are you going to evict us? That depends, Grandma said, turning to me. What do you think, sweetheart? Should I evict the people who just spent an evening humiliating you for their own amusement? All eyes turned to me. Susan looked terrified, her perfectly made-up face cracking under the weight of her fear. Jessica had tears streaming down her cheeks, her mascara running in black rivers. Richard seemed to have aged a decade in the last few minutes, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Marcus was wisely staying silent, probably calculating how this would affect his already failing day trading career. And Noah was finally looking at me. Really looking at me, like he was seeing me for the first time. Please, Susan said to me directly, the words seemingly torn from her throat. Please pretend to be better while resenting us for having power over you? I don't know, Jessica admitted after a moment, and it was probably the first honest thing she'd said all evening. At least you're honest about that, Grandma said. She turned to Noah. And you, young man. You sat there and let them humiliate your wife, the woman you claim to love. The woman you promised to honor and protect. I didn't know what to say, Noah said, his voice barely above a whisper. How about, stop, Grandma suggested. How about, that's my wife you're talking about. How about, the woman I love comes from a family of good, hardworking people and I'm proud to be part of it. Any of those would have been a good start. You're right, Noah said, looking at me with tears in his eyes. I failed you. I've been failing you for 2 years. Every time I let them say something cruel. Every time I chose keeping the peace over defending you. Why? I asked him directly. Why was their approval more important than my feelings? Because I'm weak, Noah admitted. Because I've spent my whole life trying to earn their love, and I never learned that their love comes with conditions, that it's not really love at all. That's not true, Susan protested. We love our son unconditionally. Do you? Noah asked, turning to face his mother. Would you love me if I was poor? If I worked in a factory like her father? If I lived in a small house with a chain-link fence? Susan opened her mouth, then closed it again, unable to answer. That's what I thought, Noah said quietly. Your love has always been conditional. Conditional on me meeting your standards, fitting your image, never embarrassing you in front of your friends. We gave you everything, Richard said. You gave me things, Noah corrected. You gave me money and status and connections, but you never gave me the freedom to be myself. You never gave me the confidence that comes from knowing you're loved for who you are, not what you achieve. We did our best, Susan said weakly. No, Noah said. You did what was easy. You threw money at problems instead of dealing with them. You bought my compliance with threats of withdrawal. You taught me that love was something to be earned, not freely given. And you passed that lesson on, I said, echoing what I'd said to him so many times before when he'd made promises he didn't keep. Then let me show you with actions, Noah said. He turned to his parents. We're done here. Don't contact us until you can genuinely apologize to my wife. Not apologize because you're afraid of losing your house, but because you understand how wrong you were. You're choosing her over us? Susan asked, incredulous. I'm choosing my wife over your prejudice, Noah said. I'm choosing love over conditions. I'm choosing the family I'm building over the one I was born into. We'll cut you off, Richard threatened. Financially. Noah actually laughed. I'm 28 years old with my own career. I haven't taken money from you in 5 years. That threat has no power anymore. You'll regret this, Susan said. The only thing I regret is not doing it sooner, Noah said. Grandma stood up, gathering her documents. Regarding your housing situation, I'm not going to evict you. That would be petty, and contrary to what you might think. I don't believe in pettiness. Susan sagged with visible relief. However, Grandma continued, and Susan tensed again. Your rent-to-own agreement has some interesting clauses you clearly never read. One of them allows for rate adjustments in cases of breach of community standards. What breach? Richard asked, though he sounded like he already knew the answer. Harassment of other residents or their families, Grandma said. Your treatment of my granddaughter certainly qualifies. Your rent just increased by 30%. 30%? Richard gasped. That's thousands of dollars a month. Yes, it is, Grandma agreed. Consider it the cost of education. Perhaps having less disposable income will teach you empathy for those who have always had less. This is extortion, Susan said. This is business, Grandma corrected. Everything is completely legal and above board. You're free to break the agreement and move elsewhere if you prefer. You know we can't do that, Richard said. The social implications alone. Yes, I imagine it would be quite embarrassing, Grandma said. To have everyone know you couldn't afford to stay in Willow restaurants or parks, never at her own home. When we pulled through the gates, I understood why. The house was massive, easily 3 times the size of Susan and Richard's place, with grounds that looked like something from a magazine. You never told me, I said as we walked through the front door into a foyer with a ceiling that seemed to reach the sky. What would you have done with the information? Grandma asked. Would it have changed how you saw me? How you saw yourself? Maybe, I admitted. Exactly, Grandma said. I wanted you to know your own worth, independent of mine. I wanted you to build your own life, make your own choices, succeed or fail on your own merits. But tonight, I said, why reveal it tonight? Because tonight they crossed a line, Grandma said. I've watched for 2 years as they pecked away at your confidence. I've held my tongue when you came to me in tears after their dinner parties. But tonight, they didn't just insult you. They insulted the life we built together in that little house. They insulted the values I tried to teach you. They needed to learn that appearances can be deceiving. Will they learn, though? Noah asked. Or will they just resent us? That's up to them, Grandma said. People can choose to learn from their mistakes, or they can choose to wallow in their bitterness. Either way, they'll be paying 30% more for the privilege of living in that house. Over the next few days, the story spread through Willowbrook Estates like wildfire. Grandma made a few strategic calls to her property managers, and suddenly everyone knew that the Hamiltons, who had spent years lording their wealth over others, were actually renters. That their famous dinner parties had been hosted in a house they didn't own. That they'd been brought low by the grandmother of the girl they'd deemed unworthy of their son. Susan tried to do damage control, but the damage was done. The country club gossips had new material, and they weren't going to let it go. Several of Susan's so-called friends distanced themselves, not wanting to be associated with the scandal. The very social structure she'd used to hurt others was now turned against her. Jessica called me a week later, crying. Please, she begged. Can you talk to your grandmother? We can't afford the increase. Marcus's yourselves, either. Noah and I started couples counseling the next week. We had a lot to work through. His inability to stand up to his family. My resentment over 2 years of feeling unsupported. The patterns we'd both developed that were unhealthy. It wasn't easy. There were sessions where we both cried. Sessions where we yelled. Sessions where we wondered if we could make it work. But Noah did the work. He read every book the therapist recommended. He practiced setting boundaries with his parents. He learned to recognize when he was falling into old patterns of seeking approval at any cost. Slowly, painfully, he became the partner I'd needed him to be from the beginning. 3 months after that dinner, we moved. Not just to a new apartment, but to a new house that we bought together, in a neighborhood where nobody knew our history. It wasn't in Willowbrook Estates. It wasn't trying to impress anyone. It was just ours, chosen because we loved it, not because of what others would think. Susan and Richard struggled with the rent increase. They had to sell Susan's Mercedes and buy a Toyota. They had to cancel their annual European vacation. They had to cut back on the designer clothes and expensive dinners. They were living the life they'd mocked, working hard just to maintain their home, and the irony wasn't lost on anyone. 6 months after that dinner, Susan showed up at our new house unannounced. She looked different. Older, tired, humbled. Her clothes were still nice but not designer. Her jewelry was minimal. Her car in our driveway was practical rather than prestigious. I need to talk to you, she said when I answered the door. I let her in, more out of curiosity than kindness. She sat on our couch, in our living room that was decorated with photos of both our families, including that picture of the little house on Maple Street that had started everything. I've been thinking, Susan said slowly, like the words were being pulled from her. About that night. About everything, really. And? I prompted when she fell silent. And I understand now, she said, what it's like to have people judge you for things beyond your control. What it's like to have to count every penny. What it's like to be looked down on. You've had 6 months of financial difficulty, I said. Apologize for the way I treated you. I'm listening, I said. I'm sorry, Susan said, tears starting to fall. I'm sorry for making you feel unwelcome. I'm sorry for judging you based on where you came from, instead of who you are. I'm sorry for teaching my son that love comes with conditions. I'm sorry for being the kind of person who needed to lose everything to learn basic human decency. What do you want from me? I asked. Nothing, Susan said. I don't deserve anything from you. I just needed you to know that I finally understand what we lost that night. We didn't just lose financial security, we lost our son. We lost any chance at a real relationship with you. We lost the opportunity to be part of your lives, and we did it all because we couldn't see past our own prejudices. Understanding and changing are two different things, I said. I know, Susan said. I'm trying to change. I'm volunteering now at a food bank. I'm learning what it's like to help people instead of judging them. I'm trying to become someone worth knowing. That's a start, I said. Can I ask you something? Susan said. That little house in the picture, were you really happy there? The happiest I've ever been, I said honestly, until I met Noah. And even then, the happiness he brought me was tainted by feeling like I had to earn my place in his life. You never had to earn anything, Susan said, then caught herself. No, that's a lie. We made you feel like you had to earn everything. We made our love and acceptance conditional on you becoming someone else. Yes, you did, I agreed. I don't expect forgiveness, Susan said. I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to know that I finally see what we threw away. A daughter-in-law who loved our son. A chance to be real grandparents someday instead of just another obligation for our grandchildren. A family that could have been built on love instead of status. Maybe someday, I said. But not today. Today, you're still learning. Today, the wounds are still too fresh. Today, I'm still angry. You have every right to be, Susan said. She stood to leave, then turned back. Your grandmother was right, you know, about the house teaching values. Our house taught our children near destruction. Richard's business struggled without the connections that came from his social status. He had to take on partners, give up control, work for someone else for the first time in his life. He learned what it was like to have a boss, to have someone else control his income, to worry about job security. Jessica finally got a job, working as a receptionist at a real estate office. It was entry-level, minimum wage plus commission if she could learn to sell. She had to learn to wake up early, to deal with difficult customers, to earn her paycheck instead of just posting pictures online. She called me once to complain about a client who'd treated her like she was beneath them. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Now you know how it feels, I told her. I'm sorry, she said, for everything. I didn't understand before. Understanding comes from experience, I said. You're getting that experience now. Marcus and Jessica had to move out of their condo and into a small apartment, not unlike the house they'd mocked in that photograph. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen so small 2 people could barely fit. Jessica sent me a picture once, trying to make light of it, but I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. 2 years after that dinner, Susan and Richard were different people. Not completely changed, but weathered, softened, humbled. They'd learned to budget, to cook their own meals, to clean their own house. They'd learned what it was like to work for everything they had instead of assuming it would always be there. Noah and I had Sunday dinners with them occasionally. Not in their dining room with its crystal and silver, but in their kitchen, eating simple meals that Susan had learned to cook. The conversation was different, too. Less about status and appearances, more about real things. Struggles and victories, dreams and fears. The kind of conversations families should have. I hated your grandmother for a long time, Richard admitted during one of those dinners. I thought she'd destroyed our lives out of spite. She didn't destroy anything, I said. She just revealed what was already broken. We were broken, Susan agreed. We'd been broken for so long we didn't even realize it. We thought success meant having more than everyone else. We never realized it meant having enough and being grateful for it. Do you miss it? Original amount. But she did reduce the increase to 15% after 2 years, when they'd shown genuine change. Everyone deserves a second chance, she said, but they have to earn it. Did they earn it? I asked. They're trying, Grandma said. That's more than most people do. 3 years after that dinner, Noah and I had our first child, a daughter. We named her Rose, after my grandmother. When we brought her to meet Susan and Richard, Susan held her with tears streaming down her face. "She's perfect," Susan whispered. "She's going to grow up knowing she's loved unconditionally," I said. "No matter what house she lives in, what car she drives, what job she has, she'll know her worth isn't determined by her bank account." "Like you knew," Susan said. "Like I knew," I agreed. "Like my parents and grandmother taught me." "Will you teach her about us?" Susan asked. "About who we used to be?" "I'll teach her about who you are now," I said. "People who learned from their mistakes. People who chose to grow. People who discovered what really matters, even if it took them a while to get there." "That's more than we deserve," Richard said. "Everyone deserves redemption if they work for it," I said. "You're working for it." We raised little Rose with both sets of grandparents in her life. My parents, still in their modest home, teaching her about hard work and perseverance. Susan and Richard, in their rented mansion, teaching her about humility and the dangers of pride. And Grandma Rose, in her estate that nobody knew she owned for so long, teaching her that true power comes from lifting others up, not tearing them down. The photograph of that little house on Maple Street still sits on our mantel, now joined by other family photos. Pictures of Rose taking her first steps, Noah and I on our wedding day, all 4 grandparents at Rose's first birthday party. A visual timeline of a family that was broken and rebuilt, stronger for having been tested. Sometimes visitors ask about that little house, noting how different it looks from the other homes in our family photos. We tell them it's where I grew up, where I learned about love and values and what really matters in life. Some people understand immediately. Others look confused, unable to reconcile the successful woman they know with the humble came from. I know what I'm worth, and none of it has anything to do with the size of my house or the balance in my bank account. Susan was wrong when she said I'd married up. The truth is, there is no up or down when it comes to human worth. There are just people, all of us struggling in different ways, all of us carrying different burdens, all of us deserving of basic respect and dignity. Some people learn that lesson early. Some learn it late. Some, sadly, never learn it at all. But for those who do learn it, like Susan and Richard finally did, there's hope for redemption. There's the possibility of building something better on the ruins of what pride destroyed. There's the chance to become the people they should have been all along. That's the real revenge in the end. Not the rent increase or the public humiliation or the reversal of power. The real revenge is living well, raising our daughter with values that matter, building a family based on love rather than conditions. The real revenge is being happy, genuinely happy, in a way Susan and Richard never were when they had everything they thought they wanted. They learned, eventually, that the little house they mocked had given me something all their money couldn't buy. The knowledge that I was loved for who I was, not what I had. That's a gift that can't be taken away, a foundation that can't be shaken, a truth that no amount of mockery can diminish. And that's what I want people to understand when they hear this story. It's not about rich versus poor or revenge served cold. It's about the danger of judging others based on appearances. It's about the importance of standing up for the people you love. It's about the power of truth to demolish carefully constructed facades. It's about learning that what really matters in life has nothing to do with what you can buy, and everything to do with who you choose to be. Susan and Richard chose to be cruel, and they paid the price. Noah chose to be weak, and he almost lost everything. But they also chose to learn, to grow, to change. And that choice, the choice to become better people even when it's hard, even when it costs you everything you thought mattered, that's the choice that defines us. I chose to forgive, eventually. Not forget, never forget, but forgive. Smart decisions. Never forgetting the little house where it all began. Was it worth it? I asked her once. Keeping the secret all those years? Secrets have power only as long as they serve a purpose, she said. Mine served its purpose perfectly. You learned your own worth without my wealth influencing you. And when the time came to reveal it, the impact was exactly what was needed. You could have just told them from the beginning, I said. Avoided all that pain. Pain is sometimes necessary for growth, Grandma said. Susan and Richard needed to feel the consequences of their actions. Noah needed to see the cost of his silence. You needed to know you could stand up for yourself. And I needed to know the right moment to act. Everything happened exactly as it should have. She was right, of course. Grandma usually is. Everything did happen as it should have. The pain led to growth. The revelation led to truth. The consequences led to change. And in the end, we all became better versions of ourselves, even if the journey was difficult. So what's your favorite revenge story? Has anyone ever underestimated you only to learn they were completely wrong? Because if there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies or proving them wrong. It's about staying true to yourself, living according to your values, and building a life that makes you genuinely happy. It's about knowing that your worth isn't determined by others' opinions or your bank account balance. It's about understanding that the smallest house can produce the biggest hearts, that the humblest beginnings can lead to the greatest victories, and that true power comes not from what you own but from who you are. That little house on Maple Street, with its peeling paint and chain-link fence, produced 3 generations of strong, principled people who know their worth. Susan and Richard's mansion, with all its crystal and silver, produced children who had to lose everything to learn basic human decency. Which house would you rather grow up in? Which values would you rather inherit? Which legacy would you rather leave? The answer seems obvious to me now, but it took that painful dinner and its aftermath to make it clear to everyone else. Sometimes truth needs a dramatic reveal to be fully appreciated. Sometimes people need to fall from their pedestals to realize they were standing on shaky ground. Sometimes it takes